Hi, Kate. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. So, last week, our listeners heard Deb Matlock on the podcast from Wild Rhythms, and we got into this whole conversation about building self confidence through nature, which is something that it seems like we have a lot of access to these days, right? The one thing, maybe one of those things that haven't been taken away from us yet with all that's going on with COVID. So, I would love for you to share with our listeners um like what brought you to this point of your journey as an equine partnered life coach, from the bright lights of Los Angeles, which is where I came from. 35 I grew up in Los Angeles and came here about 35 years ago. And what brought you from there to here, and tell us a little bit about your journey.
Sure. Yeah, I've only been in Colorado about 3 years, and my story is very much the Hollywood two horses story. I was working in Hollywood. I was in a movie studio doing marketing, and I was getting my master's in spiritual psychology. And so, because of that, it really started to get me in touch with my heart and my calling, my mission, my purpose. Really was to become more of service than to sell horror movies. And I have always loved horses. I have grown up with them, and I didn't know that they were healers or coaches until about 6 years ago. And I started to mentor, or I was a mentee with my mentor in equine therapy with addicts. And then I realized this is something I really want to do. So I mostly work with women who are in some form of life transition, working on career coaching, and also team buildings and leadership training. So confidence is a perfect topic
Mhm.
about. But what brought me here is really listening to my intuition, following my heart, and always putting the horses and my work as a priority.
And did you bring your horses with you, or did they become part of your family when you got here?
So what's interesting is my mare that I had in Los Angeles actually passed right before I was going to move, and it kind of allowed me actually to do the move in an easier way. And I actually transitioned with a corporate group that I was working with at the time. And so I have been out here, and I just got a new mare this year. Her name is Phoenix. And I'm about to get another mare that's more of a rescue at this point that I've been working with. And so I also have goats, but they're all out here in Colorado on a farm that I work on. And yeah, so I developed a new family here in Colorado.
Fantastic. It makes me think fondly back to when I came out to Colorado, because I knew one person and talk about confidence building, right? I will never forget, my brother drove out here with me. And when back in the day when you could walk somebody to their gate, right? And I will never forget him walking onto that plane. And I was like, oh shit, I am by myself. How was it for you having that transition from Los Angeles to Colorado?
Yeah, I thought it would be a little bit easier because everyone in Colorado is so nice and so open. But, having COVID threw a little wrench in it over the last year in terms of meeting new people. It has been definitely an adjustment. It's very different. Los Angeles, I was ready to be out of Los Angeles because of the constriction and the traffic and many different things. I felt like I was complete there. But what was funny is that as soon as I moved to Colorado, my practice in LA grew significantly. So I was going back to to California about every month or every other month. And I still go back frequently to see clients there. But the transition, I actually had the bigger leap when I moved from New Jersey, where I grew up, to Los Angeles. And I knew one person, and it was my friend from childhood, and she introduced me to people. But that was a bigger leap for me to do that move. So I had already made a kind of life-changing move. So I knew I could move to Colorado, and I just wanted to be in the mountains and with nature and have land and space and the farms, all of that. I love the ruralness of Longmont, but the actual city of Boulder and Denver. So it's a great mix of everything. But it was definitely an adjustment. I'm still in the process of meeting people for sure.
Cool, cool, cool. Um, so when I saw you pop up in Instagram, and our connection to Rebecca Rose, I thought that we must have this conversation because, as you do, I also work with women, especially women entrepreneurs, and there's that one element that is probably the biggest wedge in the road, and that is the self-confidence piece, the negative self-talk. You even talk about, I was watching a video on your Instagram about self-sabotage,
Mhm.
right? How we talk ourselves out of things. And share a little bit about how you work with that, and especially with the horses.
Yeah, so self-confidence is a huge piece, and it also ties to self-love and self-acceptance, and self-care, like all of the selves.
Mm.
It's not the little self, the ego self. It's the higher self. It's the bigger self. It's the intuition and our authentic self, the part of us that really deeply loves us and accepts us and forgives us for no matter what. So the horses are already very unconditionally loving and accepting, and so often women and men, and kids are really seen by them. They're witnessed by them. Um, they are heard by them. There's no ego, there's no judgment. And so people's barriers really fall down quickly, and that's why many therapists will actually refer to equine therapists or equine coaches, because there's a faster path to getting to truth. And so what's interesting is, the premise is how you do one thing is how you do anything. So in the experiential education part of working with horses, we go out into a field with them, and we're on the ground, we're eye to eye, and we're asking them to do things. We're in different forms of exercises that we're moving around with them. And so if we can't do something, that natural story comes up of like, something's wrong with me, I can't do it. And the confidence, the amount of confidence is shown very quickly. And then we're like, okay, is that working for you? If it's not working for you, let's change it. And let's change it in real time. Let's practice confidence in your body. Let's practice confidence in using your voice. And playing, right? So getting people also into states of play, which is joy, which actually is a better effect on the horses. And then all of a sudden things start working and they're like, oh, I can do that. I can lead this 1,200-pound animal. And so there's like this immediate boost of confidence that can't really come any other way, because it's such a unique experience to lead a horse that people get confidence in their bones.
This totally just brings back a recall to me. When I was a little girl, my dad went out and bought 5 ponies that we took from Missouri back to California with us. And there was that fear at first, but we all had our own pony. Mine was Star Pony. And my the confidence that I learned, I would go out riding with my friends. Like we would go and rent horses if we were on a trip or something like that. And what was interesting to me and also disheartening to me is that at these places where we would rent the horses, they would say, "Oh, hit your horse, do this and do that," and I was mortified. I was like, "No, why would you do that? You just have to talk to it. You have to look at it at the beginning and tell it. Talk to us about that and the difference in that, and really using that as a life step and how you approach things."
Yeah, and I love that your inner guidance knew that that didn't feel right to you. And that's a big piece, is trusting the inner guidance, trusting these, like, what feels good or what feels heavy is a big piece of building confidence. I am not a fan of the power over dynamic with horses, or the dominance and submission work. And it can happen really overtly, like yelling at and kicking, all the way down to subtle ways of making horses run around round pens just to learn from them. So I think what it is, what I love so much, is that the horses actually usually invite us into stillness. They invite us to open up and receive. So even not just petting their faces, which we all want to do, but to really stand there and be open body posture around a horse, to see what they might want to contribute to you, to let them lead, to see, to really see them and witness them and appreciate them. And then that love coming out of us is very quickly received by them. And that also makes us feel really good. It makes us feel like who we are. So we get in touch with that true nature of that we are loving, and we don't need to control a beast to feel good about ourselves. That's old patriarchal programming. And so it's really just about, how do we partner with sentient beings, all sentient beings, to learn from them, right? They're different from us for sure. Horses are not humans, but there's so much they can teach us when we get into more of like the stillness or the quiet, or that just deep respect and reverence for them, that there's a lot more available than just our way, right?
Hmm. Mhm. It's interesting because just telling you that story just brought up so much emotion in me right now. I feel just really, wow, I wasn't expecting that at all.
You're feeling the horses. Yeah.
I am. And just those memories of those poor horses, I kept thinking, I used to say to my girlfriends, could we just go back and release them in the middle of the night?
Yes, I love it.
um, so tell me more. I mean, and even do you feel the same? Like you said you have goats. Do you feel this same connection? Deb was talking about this a little bit. We were talking about snakes and how the fear of snakes, can do stuff. And I know that people have a big fear around horses too, even
I do.
that it's because they are so big and massive. And talk a little bit about that and how one does get past that fear.
Yeah, one of my favorite sessions is usually to work with someone that has fear of the horses because I always know that if they can face their fear there with a horse, they can bring that and face that fear out in the world.
Mm.
So if it's a big intimidating boss that they get nervous around, or it's going much bigger in their career, and their own power, I often find that the horses help us to really deal with our own sense of power. And so if people are really scared of their bigness, of their power, a big energy, um, and they will often have some fear around the horses. But most people have fear around horses because they have had a challenging experience in their past. And a lot of what I like to do is just kind of unwind that, pull that old kind of trauma out, and give them new experiences with a horse, which is really gentle. Because the best thing about horses, in my mind, is that even though they're strong and powerful and huge, um, and they can be dangerous, of course, they're prey animals. And so, they're not predators, and they are so curious and so gentle and so kind. You can watch them adjust their energy for little kids, little babies, or small animals. They will totally adjust their energy to match a younger, more like weak, so to speak, being around them because they have no malintention. One of my favorites was during a meditation with horses in Los Angeles. A client said to me, just because a horse has so much power doesn't mean they're going to misuse it. And so then we get to really understand that how do we have a right relationship with power, our own, but also with others? And horses teach us to draw boundaries, which is actually one of the best things for confidence, right? So there's a lot of those pieces, and the goats are easier for people since you mentioned them. People sometimes, I do bring people in with the goats first because they get people into that playful, curious energy. And then people are a little more open to go in with the horses. And sometimes people only want to be with the goats because it is easier for them. They are smaller. They can sit down on the ground with them. They're like the size of dogs. So that can be an easier entrance for a lot of people too. But most of my clients are really brave and they're willing to face their fear of horses, which is something I just love doing with them.
And have you had people that have just said, no, I can't do it? Just had that total breakdown that they won't do it.
Yeah, I've had people, I've had like a corporate group where someone was like, I can't do this, and it was just her fear. She wasn't willing to face it that day. In the corporate team building work, no one is forced to do anything. And they can sit and witness. They can get a lot by just being around their energy. Their hearts extend so far out that people are still going to feel the horses. And one of my favorites was a little kid who could not even touch the horse. She was so scared. She was so afraid. And so and I had a huge thoroughbred, right? She was a tall horse, big horse. So we walked down and we just stood outside of a donkey pen and we just watched the donkeys. And I actually asked her to hug a tree. I said, why don't you hug this tree and tell the tree that you're afraid and let go of it into the tree. And so she did. And I just watched her transform. And then we walked back up and I'm like, what do you think of the horse now? She's like, I think I want to say hi. And she's touching the horse now and hugging the horse. And I'm like, how do you feel? And so, I love watching people break through fear in real time because that's so much of my past. Of one of the things I've been best at is breaking through my own fear year over year, time over time. And it's one of the things I think I'm best at as a coach is helping people really face fear.
Break through the fear and decide what it is. You also, now you use the term conscious rock star. Talk about that and how does that play into all of this?
Yeah, that's a great question because it actually relates to confidence. And that is very much my old brand. I'm moving away to a website that's just kateneligan.com. But that started when I started my coaching business in 2009 when I graduated from my master's program. And my master's program in spiritual psychology has you get in touch with your intuition and your inner voice. And I decided to name mine. I called her my conscious rock star because she was very conscious of what was going on, but she was also that blend of me that was the rock star. So in my corporate career in entertainment, I was always called a rock star because I always got a ton done, and I was very type A. Um, and very successful at a young age. I was a VP at 31 years old. And so I wanted to help women feel like rock stars if they were starting to feel stuck in their lives. But I wanted them to do it from a place of being conscious, not just having it be about the ego. And so that's where that blending was. So it's like the spiritual essence of being a total rock star in the world. But I do think of a rock star as someone that is willing to go for it, right? And in the goat world we call it goat for it, but you are literally willing to goat for it because there's so much there, that the courage that happens to um to ask for the promotion. That's a big thing I'll have people do, is step into their confidence to ask for things that they want. So yeah, I find that the Conscious Rockstar was a perfect brand for me for really the last, 12 years, but I'm moving into a different space of really it being more of not necessarily having that catchphrase, but still helping people achieve these emotional intelligence skills.
Well, and I think it brings up a great point about how we're all uh, this evolution of our lives, right? That was perfect for you for a period of time, and now you're becoming something new and different, but that's still a part of you. And I think with the year that we have all just experienced, like we've had to tap into ourselves in such in sometimes a very painful way, right? Because like this was not what we expected, and 2021 is proving to you know yeah keep us going in this craziness. How would you give our listeners some tips in really I see it as really utilizing this time to the best of our ability, because we're not going to have it back again anytime. So how can we best utilize this time right now when we're still looking at COVID being at least maybe another 3 to 6 months at
Mhm.
least?
Yeah, such a good question. So I think the first is to acknowledge that it is a transition, right? And that transitions are often uncomfortable, and there is a lot of unknown in a transition. We are moving from a point A to a point B. We are in a very sort of patriarchal world with a lot of power over dynamic, and we're moving to a very, blended, balanced world of masculine and feminine energy both being acknowledged and honored. And so it can be uncomfortable. So it's first to acknowledge that, to just acknowledge that, to be okay with that. To not try to push ourselves through it, to really be in the energy. The horses will always say, stay present, be in the present moment, just be. They will often say that stillness is the answer to everything, which is really another form of meditation, but it's getting quiet and it's becoming really in that place of, in this moment, I'm okay. It's knowing this too shall pass, right? A transition is movement from one thing to another. If you look at it in the horse world, you're in a trot and then you're in a canter and you might be back to a walk. This too shall pass. We're not in this forever, as you mentioned. And to really embrace it and to get the yumminess of it is to actually start to look for the silver linings of what is coming forth right now to embrace. I don't talk about this very much, but it's coming in, and there's a big piece of in the fear training with horses to desensitize a horse so that they're not afraid of stuff. And I call it more like go embrace things, right? So go
Mm.
embrace the plastic bag that you're afraid of and see what maybe it is. Oh, it's not such a big deal, right? So it's like, can you embrace the fact that you have more time with your family, even if they drive you crazy sometimes? Or can you It's the fact that you're not spending as much money going out to restaurants, even if you miss restaurants. So whatever it might be, like what is there to actually embrace? What's the silver lining in the moment? Because I do believe that life is not happening to us, it's happening for us. So it's a school and we can learn and we can celebrate each moment that we go through. I personally, 2020 was one of the best years of my life. I also have not really said that publicly, but it was. And it was because I really held the higher perspective, I think, throughout all of it. I mean, my extrovert self was uncomfortable because I'm bored at times and like cranky at times. But for the most part, it forced me to get out into nature every single day. And being in nature it's such a higher vibration than so many other things that we do in our normal 3D world of like computers. So there's really a big opportunity, I think, for us to return to nature, get outside, walk, be with people, physically distanced if we, need to be, and to connect with the fact that the rest of the world is nature is going on without having conversations about all the people and the players.
Doesn't know who Trump is, doesn't know who Biden is, don't care.
And nor do the horses, which is why
Right.
it's very freeing to be with them because we don't need to talk about it.
Right.
Be in life and know that is continuing. And it's a great time to think about our dreams, to think about what we want to manifest, right? Even if we're not manifesting it in this moment, where are we going? What do we want to manifest? What kind of people do we want to be in a new connected society? And just stay out of the fear. We've talked about fear a lot, but that's a big
Right.
staying out of the fear is huge.
It's really huge. And, and I think back to when I think about my star pony, he was a very introverted horse or pony. And he would not, and he had Mustang in him. So he was incredibly fast, but he would only run if the other horses were running. I could never get him to run. Like him and I just couldn't go for a ride. I had to be with another horse. And then he would pass that horse. And I would love just kind of like, what is your thoughts around that of, if we use that as an analogy of, holding ourselves back and that fear factor and that confidence level again.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to watch horses because they have different confidence levels the way we do as humans. And I was thinking about talking about confidence and the confidence gap too, like that they talk about in the research between men and women and how women are naturally having less
I
confident.
love the confidence gap, by the way. Love it.
It's just so fascinating. That's a whole nother conversation. But there is also with horses, sometimes, if he needed his herd, he was potentially just more herd bound than others, which is some people really do need to have their family around them to be able to step into things or to have a team. They're not solopreneurs by nature, right? Like I think I'm much more of a solopreneur than I am like a CEO of a company with a bunch of people. So I don't need a necessarily, a herd, so to speak. But I do find sometimes that if I'm working in conjunction with someone and we have these accountability, or if you have a coach in particular, you're willing to go further. You're willing to then step into confidence.
Right.
Have a
Yes.
coach, as you know, being
Yes.
it's like we support people to go further because they have us to lean on and us to be there.
Right.
But yeah, there's often a safety in numbers thing that happens in the horse world. And I think it does also happen in the human world. And that's why I think what's important right now is that we stop dividing and we start to find what we do have in common, where there is unity points, because we are safer as one herd. And we are one herd. We have to really remember that we are one herd. We're all human beings. We all share, at least in the United States, we share living here in this country. So yeah, there's a lot I think we can learn from watching the herd. And but what's cool is that the horses don't make it right or wrong. Like if there's one horse that's at a lower part of the hierarchy, that horse is not like less important or less loved, or that's their role in the herd. Not all of the horses are going to be leaders. So it's okay to have all roles.
Mm-hmm.
So
I love that. And I love the conversation around love and hate, because I think it's something that's so in our face right now. As Americans, especially right now, that it's like, what happened? Like you just stop and go, what happened? And how hate brought more hate and this love factor. How in bringing teams together, how do you find that works when you're bringing that the love of the horse into a team that maybe is dysfunctioning?
Yeah, the team stuff is fascinating. So it's usually there's communication issues. So we work on that. We work on um, the differences in personalities and how we can become one more of a collective herd, and there is a leader in the herd that is taking care of the herd for the highest good of the entire herd. But they have, so often just watching them, like a team watching a herd and how they interact and how they will always have respect and rapport in their dynamics is something then that we talk about. How do we bring that to a team, right? So not just rapport, like you guys can all go have, dinner together and be friends, but the respect of, if one person needs more working time and their doors closed, their doors closed, like let's visit them later, right? And so we talk about strategies and specifics. We debrief and we have an action plan for a team based on what were the challenges and then what might the solutions be. So I'm really focused more on solution and on strengths. And I don't want to spend too much time on the problem. The team already knows the problem. They're already struggling in it. And it's really about, what do we need to lift out of that? And how can we learn from the horses and their way of being that works together as a team? How can we apply their wisdom essentially to corporate America?
Cool. Which brings up the whole aspect of listening, right? And could you talk about that a little bit and the importance, even in being with the horses, of listening?
I love it. Yes. It's funny because when you think about all the emotional intelligence skills, that is one of the biggest. And our second skill in my master's program, they have 26 skills, communication skills, which I bring with me to the horses and the humans. Is the second one is called heart-centered listening. And it is essentially not listening to be able to speak and respond to what someone's saying because you have something to share, but it's listening at a deeper level. It's listening with your heart. If your ears were more like hearts, how would you actually experience someone? What are they really trying to communicate? What's at the deeper level? So while I don't always call it heart-centered listening with everyone, that is truly what the horses are doing, because their hearts are 5 times the size of ours. And that is how people feel around them. They feel so deeply heard. And I truly believe that in teams, the biggest thing that we want, is truly to feel seen, heard, and loved, and to know that we have some movement for growth, really, if that's what we're interested in our career. But that's ideally what we're helping the leaders with. And leadership training is, how do you become a better listener? How do you ask open-ended questions? How do you get humble enough to not always have to have the answer and know that your team probably does, right? Um,
To know when to close your lips.
yeah. And also, how do you listen to yourself? Listen to your intuition, listen to your own gut, right? Because that's, the horses are always, they're not thinking things through. They are responding to what feels good. If it feels good, the horses will do it. If it doesn't, they won't. Safety is a big piece for them, obviously, as well as prey animals, but it is for corporate America too. Safety for corporate America is profit, right? So how do we, in sustainability, so how do we bring in these different energies of the communication skills, the emotional intelligence skills, and also still having the profit and the safety in the group, right? So it's yeah, it's all there with the horses. It's just, I'm a guide or a bridge between the two so that people can start to make connections in real time, practice solutions in real time, and then go back and bring and have it with their team. But what's neat is, because it's so somatic and experiential, people get it much deeper. So that's why they always say, oh, that experience was so memorable. I still remember that experience 10 years ago. Like, you clearly remember your experience with horses as anchored in a lot of cells of your body, and
Every time, yeah.
they do to us. So it's powerful for teams. I just hope more companies will trust it in the future, right? That they're going to trust more nature-based offsites and activities and retreats. And part of it's a waiting game, because not everyone's even working in an office right now. So
Yeah, and it will be nice to get off of Zoom, right?
yes, I think so too.
Oh my gosh, it'd be so great to do that. And with that in mind too, I think of the heart-based woman entrepreneur who we both work with, and that how, because there is that struggle between profitability and being in that heart space. Being that you are also a woman entrepreneur, as well as working with them, how do you work with that, and don't allow your heart to take you too far away from what keeps your business in operation, the money piece?
Good question. Yeah. I think that the heart is so important to listen to. It's so intelligent. I love all the heart math stuff. We started doing heart math and horses stuff in the past year. I don't think the heart can really misguide us, but what I do think can misguide us is our emotional attachments to things, which is like, I need to have this now, or this needs to be a certain way, or this is the way I've always done business, so I should keep doing business this way. Meanwhile, it gets in the way of things. So
Which this year's been a big one for that, right? I mean, a big one, like, because we had to shift, right? Pivot was the word of the year, for sure.
yeah, and for me, my heart is like, I only want to work with humans and horses together in person. Well, my business was like, and my finances were like, no, you're going to work with people on Zoom, and you're also going to do a lot of virtual coaching on the phone. And so, well, that is not necessarily the number one thing that my heart wants, because I really want to be in person. And this past year has made me realize, okay, well, we do pivot, we do what works. And I'm super grateful that the horses I work with are connected enough to me and the work that they will come right on camera and stick their noses up and be right there on screen in the Zoom. So it's worked really well. But yeah, a lot of it, I think the biggest thing, one of the horses said this to me the other day, it's why I shared about self-sabotage, don't step on yourself. So a lot of it is, how do we get out of our own way? And just because we've always doing business a certain way doesn't mean we need to. Maybe remote working is one of the best things in the future for work-life balance. And maybe that's what we needed, this, whole uproar of COVID to create new ways of working and new things to think about.
That
Right.
actually ended up giving us more time
Yeah.
than anything, that we weren't jumping in the car every 2.5 seconds to live our lives.
Yeah, and the busyness, like I used to go to 4 or 5 events in one day, like on a Sunday, or like just driving around and like, yeah. And so it's so different now to be able to think through. And my big thing right now that I'm thinking through is like, what's the routine that's going to most serve me right now? Right.
Mm,
Because
love that.
that there's a lot of discipline that it takes to work from home. And I also go to the ranch every day, so there's a lot of rethinking things. But I think we started to prioritize over the last year. We all had to start to prioritize, and there's nothing wrong with prioritizing making money, because that is the sustainability that we all need. So I think that's also something a lot of people had to really get clear about. How much do I really need to make? How am I going to make it? What would make me happy doing that? And that's good. Those are good questions to be asking.
Cool, cool. All right. Well, just to wrap this up, any final thoughts to share with our listeners here before we say goodbye?
Confidence wise, just remember to vote for it. The goats are
Vote
very
for it.
curious. They're very
I think we can
curious.
make a hashtag out. I mean, you probably already have made a
There's
hashtag.
a lot. One of my friends actually started I feel like she's started goat for it. Her license plate says goat for it. She runs the goat yoga in Los Angeles. She got me into goats because I've always loved goats. I'm a Capricorn, but I definitely never knew I loved them as much as I do. So yeah, I think that's the hashtag to remember, because and to make it fun, because confidence is one of those things that it is a skill, it's a muscle, we build it over time. But if we can be a little bit like the goats or the animals and even the horses, it's like they diffuse fear so quickly and they come back to grazing. So it's really about learning some of the ways of being from the animals that we can apply to our life and have quick shifts. Like we don't need to think about confidence for a day or be in resistance for a day or 2 days or a week. We can just start to take small little action steps, and the small little action steps build. And I believe that, I'll say, spirit meets you at the point of action. So as you take action, your higher self, the universe, spirit, whatever you want to call it, also comes in and starts to provide opportunities. So I love, how that works, and it's a process to trust.
I love that. Spirit meets you at the point of action. I'm going to quote you on that for sure.
I got that from my master's program. That is a USM quote, and I am often repurposing their stuff. So it's not me. I wish I made that one up.
Well, but it's moving through you. So I'm going to give you credit for it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
How can our listeners learn more about your work?
Sure. I'm active on Facebook and Instagram. You can put in Kate Neligan Equine Coach. My website is consciousrockstar.com. It will be moving to kateneligan.com. And that will be linked, so you can still find me through Conscious Rockstar. And those are probably the best ways, I think.
Okay. And it's Kate Neligan, and Neligan is Neligan. So kateneligan.com. And we'll put that down in the show notes as well, so that everyone can link over to that as well. Kate, it has been a delight. Thank you so much for bringing up so much emotion in me this morning. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
You bet.